Sound Speeds, and welcome back to the Sound Speeds podcast. I am hoping that we will all be back to work soon. Film industry people have been out of work for a long time. Many people, if they've gotten anything, it might be an occasional commercial, it might be an occasional day playing for one of the few shows that's going on, if at all. I know a lot of people that haven't worked any days in all of 2024 and have worked very few in 2023. I'm one of them. I worked 17 days in all of 2023, and none of them were in the second half of last year or in this year at all. I cannot wait until I get back to work. It's going to be so amazing. And we have a fighting chance of getting back to work, hopefully this fall. The reason why is because IATSE is done with the negotiations and we've ratified our contracts. The Teamsters just got through doing the same thing. They negotiated their contracts and it has now been ratified. So hopefully the studios will say, let's get back to work and maybe start doing shows before the end of the year. I say before the end of the year because it used to be that the producers would not start a show if it's too late in the year, and then they would open the companies, because normally the way it works is the productions don't just, let's just say Sony decides that they're going to sponsor a movie. They don't just say, let's make a movie and let's open up the production office next week and we're going to start shooting the week after. It takes time because the studio doesn't just create a Sony picture. What they do usually is they will hire somebody who will make a company, and that company might be, let's just call it SoundSpeeds Productions, just for the sake of it. So Sony, let's say, pays $50 million to SoundSpeeds Productions to create a movie. A producer will sign off on saying that they are able to make that movie within the budget. And then that producer will figure out what city they want to go to, and they will open up a company, SoundSpeeds Productions. And that way that Sony is basically paying a production for a movie. So here is the money we're paying for this movie, and you need to produce the movie for that amount. So the producers will do just that. If it ends up being too much, it's got to go out of their own pocket. If it ends up being under, then they can maybe pocket a little bit more. That's kind of the way it is. And so what will end up happening is over the course of time, the show will start running out of that budget. So once they form the company, they'll have to get a business license. They'll have to get a business, established basically in that area. So they'll have to get they'll have to get a warehouse or a soundstage. They're going to have to get spaces. They're going to, that they're going to be using for locations. They're going to have to hire people. They're going to have to basically go into production and figure out how the schedule is going to work, determine what sets need to be built, how they're going to do everything, and then they put all the money into it. So it's going to take time. It doesn't just happen where you open up a production company and instantly start shooting the following week. It doesn't happen. There has to be a process behind it, and that process takes weeks. So being that right now we're in early August, there's only 5 months left of the year, including the one that we're currently in. So if a production says, great, we got money ready, let's just throw it into a production. The production will take approximately 6 to 8 weeks, maybe a couple of months to get the project going. The thing is, though, let's just say that it's a television show that's going to take 4 months to do. Is it going to be better for them to start a show that's going to take 2 months, maybe starting until October, early October, if they open the company now and we start a production in early October, but it's a 4-month-long show? Is it going to be worth it, them opening up a show that is going to finish in early January, let's say, because it's got to shoot, from all through October through December, or October, November, December, January, and then it would finish in early February. Is it going to be better for them to start a show in October, or is it going to be better for them to start a show after the new year? Many times they will opt to do that, because if you hire a production crew that's out of town, there's anybody that's out of town, usually you'll have to pay not just their idle days, housing, per diem, that kind of stuff. You'll also have to cover certain times for them to go home to be with their family, like through the holidays. Thanksgiving and Christmas, New Year's usually being the big ones. So that just throws a wrench in your production schedule, because you can't shoot, for at least a few days. And most of the time, crews like to take at least a week or so off work for the holidays to spend time with their families. So that means basically not having crew. Some crew will be paid. Some crew, like IATSE, is usually not paid if it's more than a week or so. You'll just not get the money at all for a holiday. Some crafts are paid. Like Teamsters are usually considered weekly hires, and weekly hires would get paid if you were going to be off for an extended period of time. IATSE are usually daily hires, so you're not going to get that money unless if you don't work for over a week, you're not going to get money for that. So if you're off, usually the way the holidays, for example, work is you have to work the day before and the day after a holiday on the production calendar. So if it's a Monday through Friday standard, then what will end up happening is, let's just say that it's Thanksgiving. The holiday is on Thursday. So you will work, let's just say the production schedule is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you're off for the Thursday and the day after Thanksgiving, which is technically a holiday also. And then the production schedule resumes on Monday. So that means you have to work you have to work Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, and Monday, the day after day after Thanksgiving. So the Monday after Thanksgiving. And if you work both of those, then you get paid the holidays between them, because the total amount of time is not at least a week from Wednesday to Monday. Now, if the production decided that they were going to take the entire week of Thanksgiving off, not work Monday through Friday of that week, obviously not the two holidays, but the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday before that, and they finished the Friday before, and then it was 9 days off until they went back to work, by IATSE contract, they would not owe the IATSE crew for those holidays. But most of the time, they don't want to take that kind of extended period off. They will take it for Christmas, because you'll end up, not having to go past, let's say, December 22nd. And then you'll be off the week of, the next week, and then the week after that, and then resuming the week after. So normally there's 2 weeks off. That's usually the way the production calendars have been running the past few years. So when that happens, you'll have extended period of time off. I think I've gotten totally off on a tangent, but hopefully I've explained myself fairly well. But the main point here is that if a show is going to go over the Christmas holidays, it requires shutting down for an extended period of time. And a lot of shows don't want to do that. They would rather just stay going. If you're going to take a day or two off for a holiday, that's fine, but they don't want to be off for an extended period of time. So if they can't finish a show usually before the end of the year, they don't normally start it until the following year, unless it's a long-running show. If it's a long-running show, they'll understand it and say, the crew was probably going to want to take a break at this point. So they'll probably go ahead and do it, because the crew would love to have a 2-week time period that's off. So most of the time, though, if a show is going to go over the holidays, it has to be an extended time run. If it doesn't want to go over the holidays like that and shut down for 2 weeks, then it's not going to be an extended time. So hopefully we'll be back. And hopefully it'll be a show that we will be able to finish before the end of the year, and they'll go ahead and do it. But then that means getting the money, getting the production going kind of ASAP, because if not, the production crew that's going to be working on the show, they can send him home, and then starting the new year, go ahead and amp up and say, let's start production at that point. But most of the time, if they're going to start up a company, they don't start it up until the calendar year that they're looking to go in. In recent years, though, it's been a little bit different. Sometimes they're willing to start, before the end of the year, especially if they can finish before the end of the year. But then the production company still has to be open to shut down. There has to be a beginning before production starts with prep and everything, and then afterwards taking down sets and wrapping up the movie. So that's done in the office, though. So anyway, I don't know how I got on this tangent. Let's go ahead and jump into our first topic. One of the questions I've received, and I haven't received a whole lot of questions lately, is how do you get sound in a wide shot? Well, I'm assuming that this is someone who wants to try to get it on a boom, as opposed to someone that is okay with pretty much any kinds of mics in play, because it's fairly easy to use a lav for a wide shot. And then when you get in for the coverage, just throw a boom over them. That's the way a lot of the times productions go. But provided that you don't have access to lavalier microphones, or you don't want to use them, you just want to play everything on a boom, what are your options there? Well, one of them would involve plant microphones. So let's just say that there's someone sitting at a table. Do you want to use a lav and hide it someplace in a really weird out of, camera shot site, someplace where, like, if someone's sitting on a table with nothing there, you can't really place a microphone very well. Now, you could put it between the person and the table, but then it's way down low and it's going to be far away from their mouth. So It's not going to be ideal there. Might as well just put a microphone down there just to have it for a wide shot, but it's not going to sound very good. It's better to just overhead mic it. But that is going to be where you might end up running into a problem because you might not have the distance. You might not have the reach out of your microphone. So if, let's just say you're using a supercardioid pattern microphone, your reach may be around 18 inches or so over the top of someone's head. But what if you are shooting someone in a mirror and the person's reflecting back, so you can't get anywhere close to them? Well, in that case, what you're going to end up having to do is wait until coverage. But what if that coverage is still going to be at an angle where you see the person reflecting back, towards the camera? The camera can easily hide low behind the actor's reflection in the mirror, so they could have all the headroom in the world. A lot of the times, cameras will go low and look up, which means revealing the microphone. It's cheating, but they'll use a low angle in order to hide themselves from camera. They'll do that quite often. Or if they're up higher, they'll use the body of the actor to cover up the camera. So again, it's cheating because there's no place for a microphone to go. If the shot is stationary, though, what you can sometimes do, depending on the background, is you can have them take a plate. So just lock off the camera, roll sound, and then using the invisible boom technique that I talk about in that video right there, you can kind of freeze it using like a freeze frame, and then they can digitally place whatever was in that space over the wide shot, whatever's in the wide shot. It's not going to work, obviously, if there's anything moving through that what would be a plate. So if there's, trees blowing around in a window or something like that behind, or your exterior and the wind is blowing around the trees, you can't exactly do this technique. It doesn't work because you're going to see the line. But if it is a wall, if it's just a typical background in a room, you can get away with that, provided the camera doesn't move. As soon as the camera starts to move, it requires more digital, tracking and stuff like that. And most of the time, productions don't want to spend that money. So the best bet you have, if you cannot reveal and see the microphone in a reflection, or you're not going to see a microphone in a reflection or something like that, but the headroom is going to be too high and the camera moves, so you can't exactly get a plate or anything, is going to be to use something that's a little bit longer reach of a microphone. Now, some sound mixers are going to say, once you pick a microphone, you got to stick with that microphone the entire scene. So when you work with a mixer like that, they're going to say, don't you change that microphone out, because we have this sound the same in the wide shots and the tights. Now, this is something that I understand the theory behind, because some sound mixers buy in on this because they want to have the same sound delivered to post, the same exact track, the same exact boom mic for the entire scene. There are some microphones, though, that you can use and it will sound very similar on a very wide shot if you're high overhead, and matching it to a microphone that would sound fatter and fuller when you get closer. The theory behind that, though, is if you end up saying use the best microphone it is for that size, for that shot. The idea there being that if you end up having a wide shot, it's going to sound different than a tight anyway, based on perspective. In a very, very wide shot, someone's going to sound farther away. Therefore, if you use a microphone with a longer reach, they can sound different than they will on the close-up. So that's acceptable. Some mixers say, no, it's got to be the same microphone. So it depends on the mixer that you're working with and their thoughts and theories on this matter. But if you are using a mixer who says one microphone the entire scene, you're at the mercy of the reach on that microphone. You're just going to have to boom it to the edge of the widest shot. So if you have a wide shot and you have a tight shot, you're going to be able to throw the boom out there, maybe angle in towards talent, try to play the perspective of the wide shot, and then hope and pray that it's not too much headroom so that it doesn't sound good for the tight. Because if you end up having 4 feet of headroom on one shot and like 2 inches of headroom on the other, if you're playing it on a boom, you're not going to be able to make a 4-foot overhead shot sound the same and sound usable for a piece of coverage that's 2 inches over the top of someone's head. It's just not going to work no matter what microphone you pick. It's not going to sound full enough. So you will want to have a microphone that is able to reach longer and deeper in the shot. But whether the sound mixer lets you do that or not is another matter. So if the mixer says, sure, pick whatever microphone you want and go for it, then you can pick a longer microphone. But even then, is it going to match the close-ups? So what you might end up doing, and you will probably have to to rely on this technique if they'll let you do it, is saying we're going to do the wide shots at the same time as the coverage. Because if there's a shot that has like 4 feet of headroom and one that has 2 inches of headroom, why are you going to shoot those at the same time? Most of the time, what they're going to do is they'll say, let's start with a 4 feet over the head wide shot, and then we'll go in for 2 inches overhead, and then let's go to a haircut. So it's the top of someone's head. And if that's the case, why not do the wide? If you have 3 different shots coming at the same angle, one of them is 4 feet of headroom, and the other 2 are 2 inches of headroom and no headroom. Why don't you run the no headroom and the 2 inches of headroom at the same time and run the wide shot separately? Well, a lot of the times, not producers necessarily, but the directors, they say, no, we want to always run the camera at the same time. And they'll start with the wide and then the second widest shot. And it's like, well, don't worry, we'll get in the coverage. Well, you're doing coverage with 2 inches of headroom. Well, we're going to go in for another size. And that's all well and good. But if you're going in for another size, why not just start with the wide shot and then go in for the other 2 sizes at the same time? Trying to convince a sound mixer of that is not going to be a problem. The sound mixer is going to be the one championing this idea. The person you have to convince is the director and maybe even the DP because they don't get it. So try to do the wide shots at the same time, because if you owe a wide shot that's wide this way and a wide shot that's wide this way, the DP may say, lighting wise, it doesn't work. I have to light for one direction, not the other side. So that's when you say, can you just do the wide shot here? And then we punch in for our 2 cameras of coverage. Then we do the wide shot over here by itself, and then go in for the 2 cameras of coverage. Sometimes the DPs will say, yeah, we can do the wide shots from both sides. Or that's when I would usually ask, is there a second size that we owe from this side that's a really wide as well? If so, can we get the wides out of the way at the same time? And usually that's the wording I'll use is, can we do, like, if we owe more than one wide shot, can we do them simultaneously? So that way we get them out of the way at the same time. That way we can do the coverage all at the same time for the multiple cameras. And that way it's going to work great for sound. Sometimes they'll go for it. If they don't, and you could basically have done everything you possibly can, you can't do you can't get them to shut down the tight camera, and they got to run it a wide and a tight at the same time. If they are moving the cameras, that way you can't just put a plant or do a plate on top and then digitally remove the boom. And you can't put a lav on them, because let's just say it's a guy at a beach and he's just sitting there in a beach and there's no place for you to hide a microphone. He's not wearing a shirt. If there's all these factors, that just are preventing you from being able to get what you can, the best thing you can do is just make the director aware of your situation. If, again, you're using the same example of someone that's, a guy sitting at the beach wearing a bathing suit and no shirt, so you can't put a lav on him. Can you put a lav on him and then have post digitally remove it? Is that an option? If they say, no, we don't have the budget for that. Okay, well, let's hope and pray the sun is going to work to your advantage. Because if you're shooting this way and the sun is behind the camera, all you can do is angle towards them and hope and pray that you can get a sound that's decent enough for you to do ADR to later. That's really the mercy of it. So hopefully this is giving you some insight as to what you can do if you're trying to get sound in a wide shot. Not always the best scenarios. The main thing is to just make sure you have all the tricks in your pocket. Try to do everything you possibly can. And if you have tried approaching them about doing a wide separately than the tights, and there are no other options or something like that, and you are not going to have good sound, the best thing you can do is just get whatever you possibly can and let post replace it. And then you just write very good notes to post and say, tried approaching the director didn't want to hear it, or the director just said, it is what it is. We have to get this shot this way because the sun's dying or whatever. Sometimes there's nothing you can do. I hate to say that, but sometimes that's the case. And when that is the case, write good notes to post, call them and let them know what the situation was. Because if you don't, they're going to say, what did this sound person do? Sound person didn't get me anything that I need. And they're going to blame you. But if you call them and say, look, I tried everything. They just were not hearing it. This is what it is for this scene. They'll say, okay, we got it. Good notes then. So there you have it. For our second topic, I thought we would discuss digital sound modulation and why it works the way it works. If you look at a lot of analog signals that are coming through and being recorded, it looks like a smooth audio wave. But if you look at digital, it's going to look like stair steps and based on the way it's modulating. And the reason why is because that is the interpretation of digital, is like, oh, it's a whole bunch of little plot points, and it looks, for digital purposes, people always think of it looking like stairs, but that's not really the way it is. It actually looks more like a bunch of points plotted along a graph. And then if you wanted to make it look realistic, you would plot it like on a lollipop graph. And then basically what would happen is from there's going to be a way that the waves would smoothly interact between the little plot points on the lollipop graph. But how is it that it's able to determine what the frequency is? Well, there's something called the Nyquist-Shannon theorem. And the Nyquist-Shannon theorem basically states that whatever the highest frequency is that you're going to be recording at, let's say 20,000 hertz for the human ear, then your sample frequency needs to be at least twice that. Why is this? Because if you have a sound wave, there's a center line, and you have the first part of the wave that goes through a crest, and then it goes past the center line, and it goes through the trough of the sound wave, and then back to center. Well, there's got to be at the very least, one sample in the crest and one sample in the trough. If there's not, then you're missing some information. And depending on the frequency that there is, if it's a higher frequency, for example, let's just say it's around 20,000 hertz and your sample frequency is 40,000 hertz, if you don't have enough samples and you have at least one sample for a crest and one sample per a trough, you have no way of figuring out the way the sound wave is going to go. If you are doing a low frequency, let's just say something that's 1,000 hertz, you still have the same 40,000 hertz, 40,000 samples essentially per second. And so there's going to be 40 samples to create a 1,000 hertz tone. And that's, simple math, because your space is basically 40,000 samples in a second, and whatever frequencies are created in that, some of them are going to be little skinnier, higher pitched ones, because that's basically what it is you have on a higher pitched, sample, it's going to be more samples per second. On a lower frequency, you're going to have a lot more samples for the one frequency. Does that make sense? So basically, if you have it where, let me just show you on the screen. For simplicity, we're going to use a graph that looks like this. So this is our center line right here. And every one of these vertical lines is a place where there's going to be a sample. So right here, someplace along this line, right here along this line. If you're talking about having a sound wave that looks like this, okay, we're making, let's go through here. It's pretty obvious as to what your sound wave looks like, right? I'm not being very, very good with this at all, but you're able to determine based on how far these are spread out, what the amplitude is going to be and how the wave generally is going to look. You see this? Like, you can tell that some of these are going to be louder and some of these are going to be a little quieter, right? You're able to see the general shape, like it looks like this, and then it gets higher pitched and louder, and then it gets, you're able to see the shape of the wave, right? So if this is, this is not going to let me go all the way back, is it? Okay, let's hope that we can erase all of our history. So that's the way it has to happen, is you plot based on the amplitude and based on the frequency. You have to place at least one little line, one little point someplace on the graph. And if it is a very low frequency, then it's going to go from like here to here to here, or maybe even it's a very gradual type thing where it goes through a pattern like, oh, geez, that was horrible. That was nothing like the way it would look. I'm sorry, because I'm forgetting to put samples on every single one of these dots. So it's got to be on every one of these vertical lines. So your wave is going to look like this, and it may end up going for quite a distance because it's going to be a lower frequency, and this is not going to be overly loud. So let's just say that it looks like this. You can see how there's one sample for every one of these vertical lines. See this? And so you can see the shape of the sound wave that it's basically plotting. And you could draw a line very seamlessly through them. Digitally, that's the way it's going to look. Even at a high frequency, you're going to be able to determine the way it's going to be once we erase all these. So for example, if we're starting here, let's just say that our next sample is here, and then our next sample is here, and then our next sample is here, and then, yeah, we'll go there just for the sake of it. You're able to see that I'm basically the path that I'm tracing with my mouse is showing that the signal here would basically go here to here to there to there, and that's generally the shape it's going to be. I didn't trace that very well at all, but you see what I'm talking about. Modulation wise, you're going to be able to determine very quickly and easily what it looks like and how it works, right? Now, the reason why you need to have at least one sample in the crest and the trough is because if you don't, then let's just say that we're trying to plot, a very, very tight frequency. Let's just say that this is that there's 20,000 hertz, but you're trying to plant, or let's just say that this is normally 40,000 samples. So you're normally going to be able to achieve about 20,000 hertz. But let's just say you're trying to plot bats that are 40,000 hertz. That means that you're only going to be able to place one little dot wherever there is a crest and not a trough. So based on this, you're not going to be able to determine much at all. Like, for example, if we start here, and let's just say that my first one is there, and then my next one is there, and then my next one is here, and then here, and there. What shape is this sound wave? Well, you may say, well, it goes from here to here to, how is it going to go? You can't figure that out because it may not be that shape at all, and it can't be because it's nothing below the center line. That'd be a really wonky, technically it's possible, but it's not going to look right. So if we started our center line here and we are trying to plot just a point, it's like, okay, well, what is the shape of this wave? You may look at it and say, well, it's pretty easy. You just go from here up to here. Well, not necessarily, because it could be that the wave actually looks more like this. Oh, geez, I'm drawing this horribly. In order to, garbage, totally garbage. Let's try this one more time. So because we're sampling 40,000 times per second, but we're trying to create a 40,000 hertz sound, we're only plotting the crest and one sample for the crest. So that means that the entire wave has to go through here and here before it gets to the next sample. So we're going to have to go, I did that horribly again. It's probably because I'm looking at this line. I should probably do this a different way. I'm going to try it one more time. And if I'm not able to create something that looks decent, I'm going to do a different tactic here. Okay, so we got to go through our crest. And there we go. And then we're going to have to determine at what point we're going to cross it again. Oh, this is terrible. We're going to do this a different way. This shows us our sample frequency. So this is the how often we are going to create a sample. If you start putting through a frequency that you want sampled, you can start to see that this frequency right here is not going to be able to be plotted properly with one point here, because you're not going to be able to see any of most of these lines. You're saying, well, there's one point there, there's one point there, but this frequency here is like, the signal frequency is 10 hertz and our sample frequency is only 1.4. You're not able to get an accurate representation of anything based on this distance, are you? You're looking at this and saying, well, geez, it's going through all of this information that you're losing just to have one plot point there. Well, you can try to create a lot more, but it looks like if you were to just plot this evenly going through the red right there, You're still not, because you're missing all of these waves. It's only as you start to get close, and we'll go close. We'll go to like 9 as opposed to 10. But even then, you may look at it and say, well, the wave looks more like this, or showing the way that the actual signal looks like it would alias. If you drew lines through it, that's not accurate at all, is it? So if it's not at least twice that, we'll go to 1.5 times. We'll go to 15 just to show you. So 15 samples. You may look at it and say, well, this looks pretty accurate. This looks like but actually it looks like it would go from here to here to here, or basically like that. So even at 1.5 samples per frequency, look at this right here. This entire crest and this entire trough has no sample representation. This one here is the same way. Then you're missing one here. So there's no information at all to say what this frequency looks like. And we're just dealing with linear frequencies here. It's a very smooth frequency. It's just creating it's a 10.1 hertz frequency. What if it was like a human voice, where it's trying to create a whole bunch of modulations that are ranging between, lower and higher pitch frequencies? This is a very smooth representation right here. And even then, it's not able to do it accurately. It requires you to go at least to 20.1 in this case. So once I hit, see this right here, it shows how at 20.1 or at 20.0, you're able to get one sample. Like if you were trying to create one sample and it looked like this, then what you'd be able to realize is that, the wave does this, and it's not going to do much for your modulation, your amplitude. You're not going to be able to see what that is. So hopefully you would have a modulation point at a different point to show that, like, as opposed to plotting everything here, you might have it be shifted over a little bit, so that way you would be able to see the volume like that. But once you start to go higher than that, and you have more than at least one plot point, you're able to determine, based on the width of the wave, you're able to determine the approximate height. So it will actually show you right here, the alias signal now, where if it's below, you're missing a lot. But if you start to go right there, above this point, now you're starting to create what is usable. It's showing you the sample frequency that is actually modulating right here, but it's only after you cross that threshold right here where you are at double. Now it's able to accurately create one sample per frequency. So even though it looks like, maybe it's doing this number, it's not showing you much for your amplitude, but it's at least showing you accurate representation of the sample frequency. So as you start to go with even more samples, it's able to create a better representation of what this frequency is doing. So this would be more like if it is frequency modulation, because the frequency is what's being modulated, but the amplitude of that frequency is being maintained consistent. That's the difference between amplitude modulation, where the frequency is just, it looks like we're talking in radio. So this right here, this would be frequency that is maintained, but it would just go to different peaks, crests and troughs, so that it would still cross and the central line at exactly the same point, because the frequency is the same. It's just the amplitude of it would change. That would be amplitude modulation, as opposed to frequency modulation, which is more like what this is, where it's changing the actual shape of the wave itself, but the actual height of it, the amplitude, is maintained the same. So hopefully this makes sense to you as to the reason why you have to have at least 2 samples per frequency, because you have to have one sample for the crest and one sample for the trough of each wave, no less. It has to maintain that. Otherwise, it's not going to be able to accurately represent it. But the Nyquist-Shannon theorem basically provides if you do it properly, and you give at least one sample per crest and one sample per trough, it is able to create the exact size and of the wave based on where it crosses right here, the amount of points here. It's able to determine, though, based on the wave height, the amplitude of it. Since the frequency is what's modulating, it's able to determine how it's able to fit in this graph by predicting And there's really only one way it's going to happen with a fixed frequency. With a fixed amplitude. There's only one way that the frequency can actually fit in there if you sample it correctly. If it's a lower pitch sample, then it's only going to fit in there one way in the modulation. So even if you go to something like this, you're now getting 2 samples, 3 samples even sometimes per, like 3 samples right here per one little wave. So it's able to determine that the wave looks like this. See, based on this. And if we go up even higher, it's able to get more samples per crest and per trough. And therefore, it's really able to make a very accurate representation of the way it looks. But when it comes down to closer to matching the signal versus the sampling frequency, 1 sample, maybe even 2, like a couple of these, we're starting to get like a couple of samples, but there's still only 1 sample here. It's still able to figure it out based on a fixed amplitude, which is, the height of these little blue lines. That's how it works. So if you've been wondering how this fits together, and then basically once it's like this, you can very easily draw the line to the same exact point, the same exact amplitude point. But since it's got to cross through the center line at exactly this sample, this period, based on exactly knowing where that is and knowing the amplitude, it's able to determine, the Nyquist-Shannon theorem is able to determine at what point you're able to create this wave and how you're able to create that wave. Hopefully this makes sense to you. So this was a little bit longer of an episode, and hopefully we were able to make sense from the information that was provided. So thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Sound Speeds Podcast, and I will see you in 2 weeks with yet another episode. And if you're watching this later in time, hey, there's going to be another episode right behind this one you can feel free to check out. But thanks for tuning in, and I will see you in the next episode with more sound advice. Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.